You won't believe what I discovered when I woke up to the sound of jackhammers destroying my $20,000 wheelchair pathway, the same money I'd secretly donated to save our HOA from bankruptcy just a month earlier. But when Karen Emmy, our power-hungry HOA board member, revealed that this was only the beginning of her neighborhood takeover, I faced a terrible dilemma. How could I expose her schemes without revealing my identity as the HOA's mysterious benefactor? Welcome to my channel. Please subscribe if you want more stories about Karens and HOA drama. The sound of jackhammers ripped me from my sleep at 7:30 a.m. sharp. I rolled my wheelchair to the window, my heart racing even before I pulled back the curtains. What I saw made my blood run cold. 3 construction workers were destroying my front pathway. The special concrete ramp I had spent months designing for wheelchair access to my home. I grabbed my phone and started recording, my hands trembling with anger as I watched them tear up the smooth, gently sloped path that had given me my independence back. The workers wore bright yellow vests with Thompson Construction printed on the back. Of course, that company belonged to Karen Emma's husband. Just last month I had anonymously donated $200,000 to save our HOA from going broke. Nobody knew it was me. I wanted to help quietly, having lived here for 15 years. Ironically, that donation was the exact amount I had spent building the very pathway being destroyed. And now here was Karen Emmy, our newest HOA board member, marching across my lawn in designer workout clothes, clipboard in hand, directing the demolition like she was conducting an orchestra. She'd moved in just 6 months ago and somehow already gotten herself elected to the board. Since then, she'd made everyone's lives miserable with constant citations and surprise inspections. "Excuse me," I called out through the open window. "What's going on with my pathway?" Karen M's head snapped up, her highlighted bob catching the morning sun. "Oh, good morning. We're removing this unauthorized modification to bring your property back up to code. You should have received my notice last week," she said with a fake smile that never reached her eyes. "I never got any notice," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "And this pathway is fully approved. I have all the permits on file," she checked her clipboard. According to HOA bylaws section 47B, all external modifications must maintain aesthetic uniformity with the neighborhood standard. Your pathway doesn't match the approved concrete color palette. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The pathway matched our neighborhood perfectly. I made sure of it. "Karen, I need this pathway to access my home. It's an ADA requirement." "Rules are rules," she chirped, waving her clipboard. "You can submit a new modification request at next month's board meeting. Just include 3 color samples and a professional architectural rendering. Oh, and the review fee is now $500. My mind raced. I had a stack of legal documents in my office, approved permits, ADA compliance certificates, and most importantly, proof of my anonymous donation that had saved this HOA. I could reveal everything. But something told me to wait. To document everything first. So I kept recording as the workers continued to destroy my pathway. My neighbor Emily peeked out from behind her curtains across the street. Just last month, Karen Emmy had made her tear out her rose garden because it attracted too many bees. Now Emily gave me a sympathetic look and held up her phone. She was recording too. I thought about all the other neighbors Karen had bullied. The Mark family had to repaint their entire house because Karen said their shade of beige was too ethnic. Mr. John was fined for letting his grandkids leave their bikes in the driveway for over an hour. Even Mrs. Laura's award-winning koi pond was under threat. The jackhammers kept pounding away at my independence. But, with every crack in the concrete, my determination grew stronger. Karen Emmy had no idea who she was dealing with. I picked up my phone and called my lawyer. I rolled outside in my pajamas, clutching the folder of permits I kept by my bed ever since Karen Emmy began her HOA crusade. The roar of the jackhammer grew louder as chunks of my pathway flew across my flower beds. "Stop this right now," I shouted. The workers paused, looking between me and Karen, who was still tapping away on her phone like she was ordering coffee instead of demolishing my independence. "Oh, good, you're awake," Karen said, not even looking up. "We tried to start early to minimize disruption. Thoughtful of us, isn't it?" I took a deep breath. Karen, I have every required permit. You can't just destroy approved modifications. She strutted over, her sneakers crunching on the broken concrete. Actually, as the new head of the Architectural Review Committee, I can. These permits, they were approved by the old board. We've implemented new guidelines. Emily was still recording from across the street. Good. We'd need evidence. New guidelines can't be applied retroactively, I said, pulling out my tablet to show her the bookmarked property laws. And the Americans with Disabilities Act clearly states, "Oh, please," Karen interrupted, waving a manicured hand. "Don't make this about disability. This is about property values. Your improvised walkway clashes with Mrs. Peterson's landscaping." I glanced at Mrs. Peterson's newly overhauled yard, which Karen had personally approved, the same Mrs. Peterson who hosted Karen's campaign meetings. "This pathway matches the exact shade and texture of the community sidewalks," I replied, pulling up the contractor's specifications. "I made sure when I spent $200,000 installing it." A flicker of surprise crossed her face, but she quickly masked it. Neighbors started to emerge, drawn by the noise. Phones came out, cameras rolled. Karen noticed. "If you have concerns about the guidelines," she said, adjusting her yoga jacket, "submit them in writing. We'll review next month. Until then," she turned to the workers, "continue." The jackhammers roared back to life. Karen smiled. "You might want to look into one of those nice fold-up ramps, much more convenient." Then she added, "Oh, and you'll be receiving a bill. HOA regulations require homeowners to cover removal costs." That was it. I pulled out my phone and dialed again. "Hello, Channel 5 News. I have a story about discriminatory housing practices, with video evidence." The jackhammer stopped. Karen froze. My phone pinged. "Got the injunction. On my way." The war for my pathway had just begun, but Karen Emmy didn't know I had one more card to play, one that would shake our entire HOA. I just had to decide if I was ready for everyone to know who really saved the neighborhood from financial ruin. I could hear whispers, see phones raised and recording. Karen Emmy noticed too. She straightened her designer yoga jacket and said, "If you have concerns about the new guidelines, you're welcome to submit them in writing to the board. We'll review them at next month's meeting." She turned to the workers. "Continue." The jackhammer roared back to life. Karen Emmy smiled that plastic smile again. "You might want to look into one of those nice fold-up ramps, much more convenient." She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and you'll be receiving a bill for today's work. HOA regulations require homeowners to cover removal costs for unauthorized modifications." As I sat there watching my independence being literally jackhammered away, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd hoped I wouldn't need. "Hello, Channel 5 News? I have a story about discriminatory housing practices you might be interested in." I raised my voice to make sure Karen Emmy could hear me over the jackhammer. "And I have video evidence." The jackhammer stopped. Karen froze mid-step. In that moment of sudden silence, my phone pinged with a message from my lawyer. "Got the injunction. On my way." The war for my pathway had just begun. But Karen Emmy didn't know that I had one more card to play, one that would shake our entire HOA to its foundations. I just had to decide if I was ready for everyone to know exactly who had saved our community from financial ruin last month. I couldn't believe my eyes when I rolled into the emergency HOA meeting. Karen Emmy had turned our community center into her personal courtroom, complete with a raised platform where she sat smugly behind a desk. The room was packed with neighbors I'd lived next to for years, many looking as confused as I felt. My hands trembled slightly as I gripped my folder of evidence. As I was saying before this interruption, Karen Emmy gestured dismissively toward my wheelchair. "Unauthorized modifications are destroying our property values." She clicked through a slideshow of my pathway, zooming in on imaginary flaws. My blood boiled, but I kept my voice steady. "Karen, would you like to explain why you rejected my perfectly legal permits?" I pulled out my documentation. The room fell silent. She blinked, clearly not expecting me to have paperwork. "Those permits," she sputtered, "aren't relevant because they weren't approved by me personally." A few neighbors exchanged worried glances. I could feel the room's energy shifting. That's when I played my trump card. Mr. John, I called out to our elderly treasurer in the back, would you mind sharing the details of last month's anonymous donation? Mr. John stood slowly, his weathered hands clutching a leather ledger. The donation of $200,000 saved us from having to triple everyone's HOA fees, he announced, his voice carrying the authority of 30 years on the board. Without it, we couldn't have fixed the pool pump or repaired the clubhouse roof. Karen Emma's face turned an interesting shade of red. What does this have to do with anything? She snapped, shuffling papers nervously. I took a deep breath. I am the anonymous donor. The room erupted in whispers. The same amount I donated to help our community is exactly what I spent on my accessible pathway, which, by the way, increased my property value according to 3 different realtors. Karen frantically dug through her stack of papers, pulling out a yellow document with shaking hands. This bylaw from 1987 clearly states all external modifications must maintain aesthetic uniformity, she said triumphantly. Interesting you should mention that bylaw, Karen, I said as I projected my own slides onto the wall. Here's your new pool installation from last month. Notice anything different from the other backyards? The room gasped. Karen's pool was definitely not uniform with anything in our neighborhood. Her face paled as I scrolled through photos of other modifications she approved for her friends, while denying similar requests from other neighbors. That's different, she stammered. I have special circumstances. Like my need for wheelchair access? I asked quietly. The room grew so silent you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Mrs. Laura from 2 doors down stood up. Karen denied my request for a small vegetable garden, claiming it would look messy. Others began standing, sharing similar stories. Karen Emma's carefully constructed facade began to crack. If you don't like how I run things, I'll just resign, she threatened, expecting us to beg her to stay. I leaned forward. Before you do, maybe we should discuss the interesting email chain I found about your plans for the HOA funds. Karen Emma's face went from red to white in record time. The ones showing you plan to use our money to build your own pathway? Right after tearing down mine. The room exploded in outrage, but as I watched Karen's empire crumble, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt sad it had come to this. All I wanted was to safely access my home. I caught Mr. John's eye. He nodded gravely and stood again. I moved for an immediate vote of no confidence. Karen looked around wildly, realizing too late her power play had backfired spectacularly. Hands went up one by one. I wondered what would happen next. Would Karen admit defeat gracefully, or did she have one final trick? Just when I thought I was alone in this fight, Emily burst through the meeting room doors, waving a thick blue folder. I have proof, she shouted, her garden-stained hands trembling. Everyone turned as she walked straight up to Karen, who looked like she'd seen a ghost. I watched in awe as Emily, my quiet next-door neighbor who had lost her award-winning rose garden to Karen's rulebook, spread dozens of photographs across the table. For 6 months, I've documented every HOA violation Karen approved for her friends while denying everyone else, she explained, her voice growing stronger. The room erupted in whispers. Emily pointed to a photo of Karen's brand-new swimming pool, built 3 feet closer to the property line than regulations allowed. Next to it, she placed a rejection letter Karen had sent to the Martinez family for the exact same request. The whispers grew louder. That's not all, Emily continued, pulling out her phone. She played a video of Karen accepting an envelope from her best friend Jessica, right before approving Jessica's non-regulation fence height. My heart raced. More neighbors stood up to share their stories. Mrs. Laura revealed how Karen had forced her to remove her vegetable garden while approving a massive greenhouse for her own sister. Tom from the corner house described how Karen fined him for his son's basketball hoop, yet ignored the identical one in her nephew's driveway. Karen's face turned redder with each accusation. She jumped up, knocking her chair back. "This is ridiculous. I've only ever enforced the rules as written." Her voice cracked as Mr. John quietly asked, "Then why aren't your own home additions in the HOA approval records?" I rolled forward and placed my folder on the table. "Karen, remember last month when you said my donation was a drop in the bucket? Well, I had my lawyer look into something. I pulled out documents showing Karen's failed attempt to secure a personal loan, dated 1 day before my anonymous donation. Gasps echoed. Mr. John projected the HOA's bank statements. Karen had planned to use HOA funds for a private pathway and patio extension. When my donation came in, she lost access to those funds. That's why she targeted my pathway. "You can't prove that. I was just following the rules," she screamed. "Actually," said Bob from Unit 12, "I work at the permit office. I legally pulled these records. Karen tried to submit personal renovation plans using HOA codes. They were rejected. 3 times. Karen shrieked. "I've managed this HOA for 5 years. You need me." Mr. John adjusted his glasses. "About that, I've called for a vote of no confidence." Hands shot up across the room, even Jessica's. Karen sputtered. "You're all making a huge mistake. The property values will plummet. You have no idea what I protected you from." Then sweet old Mrs. Laura stood up, cane in hand. "Karen, dear, I've lived here 30 years. The only thing we needed protection from was you." Applause erupted. Karen's face crumpled, but she straightened up, smoothed her hair, and pulled out her phone. "Fine, but before I go, everyone should know what your precious donor did 3 years ago at the—" "I wouldn't finish that sentence," Emily interrupted, still holding her phone. "I've been recording since you threatened to quit. Attempting to blackmail someone during an HOA meeting wouldn't look good on your real estate license renewal, would it?" Karen's last attempt at revenge died on her lips. The woman who had terrorized our neighborhood for years was finally exposed. Not a powerful HOA leader, just a bully who couldn't handle losing control. In the HOA's approval records. I wheeled myself closer to the table, spreading out my carefully organized documentation. "Karen M., I've got copies of every building permit in our neighborhood for the past 5 years. Would you like to explain why yours are missing?" The room fell silent as Karen M.'s perfectly manicured nails tapped nervously on the table. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. A text from Emily. "Channel 5 news van outside." I smiled, remembering the tip I'd sent them about questionable HOA practices in our community. Karen's eyes widened as she spotted the news crew through the window, their camera equipment glinting in the afternoon sun. More neighbors began sharing stories, forming a timeline of Karen's selective rule enforcement. The Anderson twins described how she'd threatened to fine their mother for having a medical ramp just like mine while allowing her friend to build an unauthorized deck. Each story added another puzzle piece revealing the full picture of Karen Emmy's abuse of power. But what happened next shocked everyone. Jessica, Karen's closest ally on the board, stood up with tears in her eyes. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered, pulling a stack of papers from her designer handbag. "Karen made me falsify these violation reports. She said she'd expose my past bankruptcy if I didn't help her." The room erupted in chaos. Karen lunged for the papers, but Mr. John calmly stepped between them. In the back, our HOA lawyer took notes and nodded quietly. This was bigger than my pathway now. This was about standing up to years of bullying and manipulation. Through the commotion, I caught Emily's eye. She gave me a slight nod. Tomorrow's newspaper would feature her photo evidence alongside my story. Karen must have realized it too, because she grabbed her purse and headed for the door. But before she could leave, she turned back with a sneer that made my blood run cold. "You have no idea what you've started," she hissed, pulling out her phone and dialing a number we'd soon wish she hadn't. I never expected Karen Emmy to snap like this in front of everyone, but here we were. The emergency HOA meeting had turned to complete chaos. She jumped up from her seat, face red with fury. "Fine. If you won't support my decision, I quit. Let's see how you run this HOA without me." The room fell silent. Mr. John, our treasurer, calmly adjusted his glasses and pulled a thick folder from his briefcase. "Before you make that decision, Karen, I think everyone should see these documents." My heart raced. I had given him those papers just hours earlier. Karen's smug smile disappeared as Mr. John projected photos onto the screen. There was her new pool installation from last summer, the one that got mysteriously approved in just 2 days, while Mrs. Laura waited 6 months for permission to install a small pond. Next came photos of her non-regulation fence, her oversized gazebo, and the tree she removed without permits. "You've been spying on me!" Karen Emmy's voice shook with rage. She grabbed her designer purse, ready to storm out. "Actually," Emily spoke up from the back, holding up her phone, "I just took pictures whenever I saw something that didn't match the rules you kept quoting to everyone else. And I'm not the only one." Other neighbors nodded, pulling out their phones and tablets. I rolled forward and placed my own folder on the table. "Karen, remember last month when you said my donation to the HOA was just a drop in the bucket? Well, I had my lawyer look into something interesting." I pulled out documents showing Karen's failed attempt to secure a $50,000 personal loan, dated just one day before I made my anonymous donation. Whispers spread across the room. Mrs. Laura gasped. Mr. John cleared his throat and projected the HOA's bank statements. Karen was planning to use HOA funds to build her own private pathway and patio extension. When the anonymous donation came in, which we now know was from our friend here, she lost access to those funds. That's why she targeted this accessible pathway specifically. Karen Emmy's face turned pale. "You can't prove that. I was just following the rules." "Actually," Bob from Unit 12 stood up, "I work at the permit office. I pulled these records legally." He held up more papers. "Karen tried to submit personal renovation plans using HOA authorization codes. They were rejected 3 times. "This is ridiculous," Karen shrieked, her perfect bob now messy from running her hands through it. "I've managed this HOA for 5 years. You need me." Mr. John adjusted his glasses again. "About that, I've called for an immediate vote of no confidence. All in favor?" Hands shot up across the room. Even Jessica's. Karen's staunchest ally raised her hand while avoiding eye contact. "You're all making a huge mistake," Karen sputtered, backing toward the door. "The property values will plummet. The neighborhood will fall apart. You have no idea what I protected you from." That's when sweet old Mrs. Laura slowly stood up, clutching her cane. "Karen, dear, I've lived here for 30 years. The only thing we needed protection from was you." The room erupted in applause. Karen's face crumpled as she realized she'd lost control, but then she straightened up, smoothed her hair, and pulled out her phone. "Fine, but before I go, everyone should know what your precious donor did 3 years ago at the—" "I wouldn't finish that sentence," Emily interrupted, still holding her phone up. "I've been recording since you threatened to quit. Attempting to blackmail someone during an official HOA meeting probably wouldn't look great on your real estate license renewal, would it?" I watched as Karen's last attempt at revenge died on her lips. The woman who had terrorized our neighborhood for years finally showed her true self. Not a powerful HOA president, just a bully who couldn't handle losing control. But as Karen stormed out, slamming the door behind her, I couldn't help but wonder. What would she do next? Because if there's one thing I'd learned about Karen M., it's that she never goes down without a fight. The morning of the final HOA meeting felt different. As I wheeled into our packed community center, every neighbor turned to look at me. Karen sat at the front, her designer purse clutched tightly, still thinking she held all the cards. But she didn't know what was in my folder. I pulled out the first document. A full history of every HOA rule Karen Emmy had broken herself. Her unapproved pool installation, her non-regulation fence, her illegal home business. Emily had helped me gather everything, spending late nights going through old meeting minutes and property records. "Before we vote," I said, my voice steady, "I'd like to share something interesting I found." Karen's smug smile faded as I showed photos of her violations on the projector screen. But that wasn't even the best part. Next came the proof that she'd been planning to use my donation, meant for community improvements, to build a fancy walkway to her own backyard spa. Mr. John stood up and confirmed every detail. Karen's face turned redder than her designer lipstick. "That's all lies," she shouted, pointing at me. "You're just angry because I stopped your illegal construction." Her voice cracked as she realized no one was buying her act anymore. "Just angry because I stopped your illegal construction," Karen Emmy shouted, but her voice cracked as she realized no one was buying her act anymore. That's when our local news reporter, quietly invited by Emily, began taking notes in the back of the room. Karen noticed him too. For the first time she looked scared. I wheeled forward. "Karen, I have permits for my pathway. What permits do you have for your pool?" The room went so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Karen grabbed her purse and started toward the door, but stopped when Mr. John spoke up. "We still need to vote on the no confident motion." She slumped back into her chair. The vote wasn't even close. Every single hand went up to remove Karen Emmy from the board, even her best friend Jessica's. And then came the final surprise. The community voted to elect me as the new board president, with Emily and Mr. John as my team. But here's what really made me smile. The next day, as workers rebuilt my pathway, neighbors kept stopping by, not to complain or argue, but to share cookies, offer help, or just chat. Mrs. Laura from across the street brought over her famous dumplings. Tom from 2 doors down offered to plant flowers along the edges of the path. Even Jessica came by to apologize for supporting Karen Emmy. We didn't just fix a pathway. We fixed our neighborhood. Now every Thursday we hold community meetings in my accessible backyard. Karen still lives here, and yes, she had to remove her illegal pool. Sometimes I see her peeking through her curtains during our gatherings, watching us laugh, plan, and rebuild together. Just last week we approved 3 new accessible pathways for elderly neighbors. Mr. John says our community fund has never been healthier. Emily started a new committee to help residents understand HOA rules clearly and fairly. And the funniest part? Karen now has to submit a request form every time she wants to change her garden gnome's outfit. Those are the rules, and this time everyone follows them equally. My pathway looks better than ever, with solar lights that Emily picked out and benches where neighbors actually stop to talk. It's not just my accessible entrance anymore. It's become the heart of our community, and every time I wheel down it, I remember how standing up to a bully helped us all discover something we didn't even know we were missing: real community spirit. Who knew a broken pathway could build such strong bridges between neighbors? The information in this video is for informational and entertainment purposes only. HOA rules and laws vary by state and community.